Folks, thanks for tuning in again today. I can tell you it's going to be exciting. Please stick with us here right away as we look at news that matters and giving you behind the scene on a number of items. Venezuelan oil. That's an interesting topic here in Canada, as people are saying because of what the U.S. did, because Donald Trump has shut down one of the most vicious narco-terrorists in the world today, being President Maduro of Venezuela, that the Venezuelan oil is now going to hurt Canadian oil. Nobody has hurt Canadian oil and gas and refined oil, liquid natural gas, more than left-leaning, culturally Marxist Canadians themselves. Governments and politicians who have tried everything they can to make people think the Canadian refined oil products are harmful and have almost destroyed the industry in Canada. They are the ones, Canadians are the ones who have hurt the very product that could be helping nations around the world to break free from everything from coal-fired plants in China, to break free from the hold that Putin in Russia has on European countries. Everything that could be done with Canadian oil has been hurt more by people in Canada than anything coming out of the situation in Venezuela. And another thing that we're seeing interesting around media internationally, but in Canada, is left-leaning culturally Marxist media like the CBC and others, and also the BBC and CNN in the US, talking with great shock and horror about the fact that, can you believe it, free drugs, harmful addictive drugs, may be available, not free, but for purchase on Amazon. And quite rightly, that is a concern, but hardly a peep coming out of left-leaning socialist parties and even liberal parties in Canada for years about the fact that Canadian governments, especially provincial governments and some city governments, have been supplying addictive drugs to vulnerable people for decades in Canada, and also providing wonderfully safe places for them to shoot up these drugs and then to be very vulnerable to predators who take advantage of them while they're in a stoned out state. So kind of hypocritical to see Canadian media reacting about Amazon providing terrible free and destructive drugs when Canadian governments have been doing it, not just providing the drugs, but some Canadian governments even provide for free out of dispensing machine the paraphernalia so you can shoot up or smoke up those drugs. Give your head a shake, you leftists in Canada, please. Vancouver home sales now reporting, as I predicted would happen. I predicted this last year, worst sales activity in probably 2 decades. What are politicians doing provincially and federally that everybody is afraid to address the now famous decision from a BC, British Columbia Supreme Court justice, who is allowing a land claim to go ahead against large portions of the city of Richmond by the Cowichan First Nation band, who claim that this used to be an area where they would camp in the summer while they were doing their fishing. I'll tell you what, folks, every day, every hour that politicians are quivering in fear to stand up and say, look, we are going to make sure things are equitable for First Nations, but one thing we're not going to do is dismantle the constitutional system of property ownership, and that's exactly what's been happening. And politicians across Canada, other than perhaps the federal Conservatives and perhaps the provincial Conservatives in Alberta, are staying silent about this atrocious ruling and the fact that nothing is being dealt with it. Everybody is going to lose, including First Nations, for their own prosperity. Well, talking about the situation in Venezuela, it certainly has sent a shockwave everywhere, and it's interesting to see the less than honorable governments in places like Colombia, the leader of Colombia shaking his fist at the US and saying, come and get me. Mexico, Cuba, basically any government that's been severely left-leaning and also playing footsie with narco-terrorists and drug dealers who are sending their product principally into the United States, but around the world to destroy the lives of hundreds of thousands of young people. They're all nervous now. They're all getting scared. And really something that really is interesting. I'll tell you what they should be doing, what countries should be doing. Now is the moment to be at the United Nations, and instead of condemning the apprehension of one of the world's worst narco-terrorist presidents, being Maduro, who actually was indicted, remember this, by President Biden. He was not indicted by President Trump. It was Biden who took out the hit on Maduro, and now it's been fulfilled. Remember, in 1989, the U.S. invaded Panama. It needed to happen, and they apprehended President Noriega, dragged him back to the United States, where he faced a 20-year drug term and time in prison. You know, it really would be about time, don't you think, especially that left-leaning media around the world, that CNN, BBC, CBC, started speaking out against the destruction that these socialist governments have had throughout South America and in Africa on their own people, and how that inevitably leads to their own leaders falling into corruption. Shouldn't it be about time we started speaking about that? But I guess there's too much nervousness about losing face among the culturally Marxist friends and neighbors, and so nobody really wants to speak up about it. But it's time, folks, that we did. An interesting move in the U.S., if you haven't heard of it, the Corporation of Public Broadcasting just did an interesting thing. They voted themselves out of existence. That's the corporation that would be behind major networks, principally like National Public Radio and others, which are clearly identified through the years, through the decades, as being significantly left-leaning organizations pretending to be centrist public broadcasters. They never have been. They've always cranked hard to the left. And with the new regime in the United States, it's just been stated that, look, those places can exist. You can have National Public Radio, but taxing people, hardworking people, for the purpose of allowing severe left-wing propaganda to be cast about is not something that the American government is interested in anymore. And so they tried National Public Radio, because everybody said, look, you can go ahead, you can exist and you can do everything, but set up your own funding. If people love you that much, set up crowdfunding. Go to your multi-million-dollar friends in Hollywood and other places and in Silicon Valley and get the funding to continue. And you know what? Nobody wants to fund them. And so, quite rightly, they're voting themselves out of existence. Maybe CBC in Canada should be taking a look at that. The fact that, and I've proposed many times in the past, CBC should be allowed to raise their own funds. Let's create a market mechanism where they can go to the people and say, give us the millions that we need to continue broadcasting a left-wing agenda, especially do our broadcasting in competition with broadcasters and newsmakers that don't get any funding, but it looks like no money is forthcoming from individual citizens to want that type of broadcasting. So why do we continue to tax people to have it? A fair question. You know, in the world of international hockey, especially junior hockey, where Canada has always been a world leader, not quite leading as much in last number of years, generally speaking, as we would like to see. And media in Canada, it's always fascinating. They struggle and strive. They grapple at straws to try and make, like, in certain areas where Canada isn't the best, they try and still sound like we are the best. And look at the headlines. It's kind of cringy. Canadian media, CBC and others, are using headlines like, I mean, the fact that Canada, again, for another year, did not make it into the finals, didn't even get the silver, but we're proudly saying that Canada's junior hockey team they're making the claims that we have claimed the bronze. We've claimed the bronze. Yay, we beat Finland. And they're calling out like this is a great and wonderful achievement. Folks, we should be thinking as Wayne Gretzky did many years ago at a time when, one of the times when Canada did not win the Olympics. They came second, and the Canadian media was saying, isn't this great? They said to him, we won the silver. He said, no, we lost the gold. Let's get back to that type of thinking, folks. Canada should be number one, and not getting excited and claiming all kinds of ecstatic things because we won, or we toppled a country and we managed to grab the bronze. Well, when you look at some of the trends that are going on in over this last year, and there's been a lot of roundup and looking back at some of the trends with Gen Z and the 20 and 30-year-olds. For instance, Gucci purses making a bit of a comeback, according to some media reports among the young crowd. I don't know where they're getting that kind of money, but they obviously are, probably from parents and others. And in terms of fashion, I am always in the market for running shoes, being a regular runner, and my kids give me annually, they give me the cards to go shopping at the running stores for good running shoes. And I see polka dot runners everywhere over the last year. Now I see when I go to famous Canadian designs like Lululemon, looking for sportswear, polka dots making a comeback in the sporting field. That's been kind of interesting to watch. And I see, because female runners pass me now more and more as I age, and they pass me in their running. Hoka runners I looked at Hoka runners a couple of years ago. I think they're a good runner from everything I hear. I was a little concerned about the possibility of twisting or turning an ankle because they've got such thick cushioned soles. But now Hoka runners making it into a fashion look for young women. That's been an interesting one. And guess what? Good to see people moving away from chemical approaches to trying to keep ourselves youthful and beautiful. But it's been a bit of a trend now to use the let's call it the banana phase of smearing banana on your face, apparently, to help with your complexion. So that's an interesting new type of peel, and we'll see where that goes if that continues. And another trend, which is not washing your face at all, so that you can preserve apparently some natural barrier that's there, and allow the natural oils on the skin provide all kinds of wonderful things to your skin. Listen, I'm all for natural things, and I think there's been way too much over the last few years of especially young girls being pressured socially into putting on all kinds of makeup gear that they don't even need for their own beautiful faces. But now looking at, maybe the answer is not washing your face at all. Interesting to see how things swing from one area to another. And looking at an interesting development, and we've been talking about this in the cultural and the media industry, Angel Studios, which has been a great backer of family type film and faith-based film. And we've seen, as I predicted, the David movie, the animated movie about the biblical figure of David, that I predicted that would do well. And it is so far in second place, only behind Avatar. And Avatar opened in more theaters than David did. To watch the movie, it's a great movie, folks. Take your kids. Matter of fact, take your parents, take your grandparents. It's a great movie. And amazingly biblically accurate, but very interesting. And I'm sending out a notice here to Angel. Don't start the Disney slide again. Don't start trying to accommodate people or trying to worry about offending people. There's a great scene where David, the biblical scene, the historically accurate scene, where David goes after a lion who's stealing some of the sheep, and he manages to save one of the sheep, and then in the biblical account, the lion turns on him and David has to kill him. Well, in the Angel Studio depiction, David pushes the lion down a cliff, and the lion gets stuck in between a couple of rocks, and David goes scrambling down the rocks and actually risks his life to let the lion go free. It's just, it's a cultural moment that we don't need. I know we're afraid of offending people who think that anybody at all would want to harm anything in nature. And then add to the fact that all of the depictions, whether it's of the Philistines attacking or the fierce-looking warriors, it's all interesting historical depictions. But David, as a young boy, pictured with, get it, to hold on yourself here, purple hair. David with purple hair and looking very androgynous in his younger days and wearing the dress-like skirt. It's starting to get a bit of a reaction from viewers. Angel Studios, I'm telling you, don't start the Disney slide. Just stick with the truth, animate it, and have fun with it. Get attention as you are. I'm a subscriber right now, but you don't want to lose me. Just stick with the reality and help everybody to feel good about the truth again. Thanks very much for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow.